Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown, and today we're going to be talking about Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch Classic, Volume 2. So here you got the front cover, and here you got the back. So this volume contains issues 11 through 20 of the 90s Ghost Rider series, as well as issue number 28 of Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme. So Howard Mackie continues to be the regular series writer for the series, for the stories in this volume, and you have several artists on hand to do the art duties. You have Larry Stroman doing some wonderful guest art for issue number 11. Then you have Javier Saltares doing his last issue for the series as regular artist with issue number 12. And then you have Mark Texeria taking over for art chores, both pencils and inks, starting with issue number 13, and you have Ron Wagner doing guest art on issue number 20. And for the Doctor Strange story, let me make sure I got the name right, you have Chris Marrinan doing the art duties on the Doctor Strange story. So all in all, I think that this is a good volume, a good collection, and I think that the series started to improve in terms of, say, having a solid narrative direction in terms of, say, world building and character development, and continuing the sense of mystery that the stories in the first volume were good at introducing. And so the only downside I could think of would be that the last two issues in this volume, issues 19 and 20 of the Ghost Rider series, are oftentimes rightfully regarded as, kind of a low point for the Ghost Rider book. And I honestly wish that, the people that put this volume together had either ended the book with issue number 18, which is definitely a high point for the series and is definitely a story wherein there's a sense of closure concerning certain plot threads, as well as Danny Ketch's character. And also, they could have easily put in, another Ghost Rider story. Say, if they'd had to include issues 19 and 20, they could have, thrown in something like, the classic 90s Hearts of Darkness story, that had Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and Punisher going up against Blackheart. And that's a pretty good Ghost Rider story from the 90s. And I honestly think that if they had put that in this volume, it definitely would have taken, the sour taste of issues 19 and 20, away, for, readers to further enjoy the volume. But I honestly think that in terms of writing, Howard Mackie actually does a better job with most of the stories in this volume, in the sense of, say, actually developing the characters of both Ghost Rider and Danny Ketch. And also, the stories get a lot of mileage once Johnny Blaze, the original host for Ghost Rider, namely Zarathos, was brought back into the fold. And so, having a classic character like Johnny Blaze on hand and being written by an author who has gone on record to say that he was a huge fan of the original Ghost Rider series, you could definitely tell that anytime Johnny Blaze is, present, that the character's depiction is coming from a sense of, respect, from, say, someone who cares about the character. And his interactions with both Ghost Rider and Danny Ketch are some of the best moments of the book. And so, things kick off where Danny Ketch is being besieged on a regular basis at night by the villain Nightmare, who is usually a Doctor Strange foe. But it turns out that Nightmare is actually wanting to make contact with Ghost Rider because he's convinced that this quote-unquote new Ghost Rider is in fact Zarathos, who is once again suffering from amnesia and has somehow escaped his imprisonment from the Soul Crystal, which was his fate at the end of the original Ghost Rider series. And so in the meantime, Danny Ketch in the waking world is trying to juggle having a sense of a personal life as well as trying to say do some detective work on his own in trying to find the villain Zodiac, who we last saw in issue number 10 back in volume 1. And unfortunately, there seems to be something happening wherein Danny's behavior is starting to become more like Ghost Rider's, and Ghost Rider's behavior is starting to become, if not quite like Danny's, then at the very least more human. And he's while he still has this mission of vengeance against evildoers who have harmed the innocent or killed the innocent, he's starting to question his own motives. He doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing. All he knows is that he's compelled to do it, but he's questioning himself and his purpose. And that's definitely a human feeling that the original Ghost Rider did not have. And so the two of them seem to be sort of taking traits from one another, but then there's a certain point where Danny's able to find Zodiac and is in the process of turning into Ghost Rider in order to attack him, which is when Nightmare makes his move and basically brings both Danny and Ghost Rider into his realm, in which he admits that he doesn't really have a whole lot of use for Danny other than Danny just being the host of the new Ghost Rider, but it's Ghost Rider that he wants to talk with. And so he recounts the story of Zarathos to both Ghost Rider and Danny. And for those of you who followed my reviews of the original Ghost Rider series, you got Zarathos' origin story in the last few issues, of the Ghost Rider series. And so Nightmare, he even, talks about how, it's becoming kind of annoying, that Zarathos keeps on, getting amnesia, because this is the second time he's had to recount his own story to him. But he talks about how Zarathos was once a powerful demon who, basically fed on, the souls of, humanity, because there was a massive, tribe, of Native Americans that worshipped him, and basically they kept a steady supply of human sacrifices for him. And Zarathos became so powerful that he rivaled Mephisto, but Mephisto ultimately defeated Zarathos, and by way of having a human pawn who would eventually become the villain Centurius, the immortal villain Centurius, that Zarathos, aka Ghost Rider, fought at the end of his original series. And so Nightmare recounts this to Ghost Rider, and he reminds him that the last anyone saw of him, he and Centurius were fighting each other in the Soul Crystal, which the last we saw was in the issues of 429 and 430 of the issues of the Mighty Thor, wherein you saw Mephisto holding the Soul Crystal and studying it, but it was definitely the Soul Crystal that had Zarathos and Centurius imprisoned in it. But so we get this abridged retelling of Zarathos' origin story, as well as the involvement of Johnny Blaze recounted, and how Johnny Blaze was finally free of Zarathos. But once he finishes telling his story to Ghost Rider, he's puzzled because these memories that he's being shown, while fascinating and definitely intriguing, they mean nothing to him. And so there's no moment of aha, that's who I really am. It's just, this is these are pictures from someone else's life. I don't know who this Zarathos is. And so once he admits to Nightmare that he has no idea what he's talking about, he tells him that if you're really malevolent entity who's intent on subjugating humanity, then you're a foe of me as well. And so he tries to take the fight to Nightmare, but because they're in Nightmare's realm, and they're at a point where Ghost Rider and Danny are split, Nightmare is able to basically use his powers to, have all sorts of monstrosities attack Ghost Rider. And Danny, in the meantime, is being ignored, and he initially is considering, just, using Ghost Rider's bike to hightail it out of Nightmare's realm. But then, he realizes that he can't just leave Ghost Rider there, because, there's still so much that, the two of them have to figure out. And so, he goes back to Ghost Rider and gets him out of, the struggle that he's in. And, the two of them try and hightail it out of Nightmare's realm, but, it's not until the two of them, realize that they have to merge, that's when they realize that, only then will they be able to fully escape from Nightmare's realm by working together, not just, person to person, but literally, becoming one once more. And so only when they merge do they finally emerge back, come out and back into, our reality, or I should say, their reality, and it's at that point where, Ghost Rider, he sees Zodiac, and, which is, when right at the moment when he was about to transform, Danny was about to transform into Zodiac, Ghost Rider anyway, to attack Zodiac, but then he's stopped, by a mystical barrier that's been erected by Doctor Strange of all people. And so the reason Doctor Strange has come onto the scene is because, he has a pupil of his who is possessed by a demon, or I should say has a demon hiding out in her body. And, he's in the process of kind of this mystical scavenger hunt, getting, items, from, certain supernatural individuals, that, these items, once combined will provide, the cure, for, his pupil / friend's possession. And so one of these ingredients that he needs is hellfire from a demon. And so, and it's basically Ghost Rider, what with his hellish nature, seems to be, the, best choice in the sense that, he's an entity that is somewhat familiar to Doctor Strange, albeit in the sense that Doctor Strange had tangled with Zarathos before, and much like Nightmare, he's convinced that this new Ghost Rider is merely Zarathos come back with a case of amnesia, but Ghost Rider is adamant that he's not Zarathos, and he's saying, you're the second person who's called me that, this night. And so the two of them end up, having, this struggle with one another briefly until, Doctor Strange, explains, his predicament. And so, but in the meantime, though, Ghost Rider, he has this, overwhelming obsession, with Zodiac, because Zodiac, has gotten away from him, twice already. Once back in issue 10, and then, now because of Doctor Strange, stop putting, that mystical barrier up and trying to, attack him because he thought he was Zarathos. And so, Ghost Rider is able to basically put Doctor Strange on the defensive and is able to, make his way to Zodiac's hideout. And he initially makes short work of Zodiac's minions until they, bring out these weapons that, while technological in origin, they have this energy, that is meant to, combat anything supernatural. And so, they're able to temporarily defeat Ghost Rider until Doctor Strange and his companions come in and help him out. And they're able to, disrupt, the ceremony that Zodiac has been enacting, because it turns out that Zodiac is a mercenary who is working for a series of, supernatural or demonic clients. And, he's in the process of, working with this, cabal of sorcerers that are leeching the life of human sacrifices, namely children, in order to summon a demon. And so they disrupt the ceremony, but the demon's summoned anyway. And Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange end up having to work together, to banish this demon back to its realm. And in the meantime, Ghost Rider makes his way to Zodiac and is about to use his penance stare on him when Zodiac admits that much like the Zodiac that Ghost Rider tangled with before, this Zodiac is also a robotic duplicate. And so Ghost Rider just destroys him in rage. And so from there, Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider decide to work together to not only take out Zodiac, but to go to this hellish realm in order to gain the hellfire from a demon, because he after this initial scuffle with Zodiac, he had attempted to take the hellfire from Ghost Rider after the two of them had worked together, and Doctor Strange had explained his situation to him and how there's kind of a life at stake. And so Ghost Rider lets Doctor Strange attempt to take the fire from him, but it's causing him more harm than expected. And it turns out that because of the nature of the spell, it's clashing with Ghost Rider's makeup, or I guess you could say the way, like, his composition and everything. So apparently while he is demonic in origin, he's not the type of demon that that Doctor Strange is suspecting that he is, or at the very least there's more to him than he and his companions thought, and hence why they have to go into this other realm in order to find hellfire another way. And so they eventually do get the hellfire that they need from another demon, and they also are able to further disrupt Zodiac's plans. But it turns out that the Zodiac that they were fighting this time was the real thing, who was pretending to be an android to throw Ghost Rider off. And so the first two times it was a robotic duplicate, but this time it was the real thing. And so but he's able to get away from Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange, and so Doctor Strange and his companions go their way, and Ghost Rider goes another. And from there he comes across a villain by the name of Snowblind, who it turns out is actually working for Death Watch, the sort of a aspiring crime lord from back in Volume 1. And the two of them actually knew each other at some point. And so, Snowblind is actually the head of a drug empire, and Ghost Rider gets involved with him because some of these criminals that he's been going after, like on the streets, are they're familiar with Snowblind because they're getting their drugs from him. And basically, they're coked out of their minds and, taking, their rage out on, innocent civilians. And so once Ghost Rider is able to interrogate some of them, that's how he gets the name of Snowblind. And so, once, Death Watch and Snowblind are both aware that Ghost Rider's coming after Snowblind, they said, or Snowblind, goes ahead and sets up a trap, and the two of them have this fight, and initially it kind of goes back and forth because Snowblind is literally blind, but he is able to use this power of his, wherein he's able to generate this white field of light, wherein he's the only one who can see in this light, and also being in this light makes him stronger. But Ghost Rider is actually able to see Snowblind and catches him off guard, And so, the fight goes back and forth between the two of them. And right when Ghost Rider is about to give Snowblind his penance stare, Snowblind turns the white field off to where he's back to being blind. So that doesn't work. And right then and there, some police officers come in, and it turns out that they're actually on Snowblind's payroll. But Ghost Rider, he can't tell whether they're corrupt or not. And so rather than fighting servants of the law, he hightails it out of there. Which at that point, Snowblind orders one of the officers to kill the other so they can blame his death on Ghost Rider. And that in turn feeds into this reporter's vendetta against Ghost Rider, who has been talking crap about him since Volume 1. And it turns out the reason she's so determined to, smear Ghost Rider's reputation is because she too is working for Death Watch. And so there's this, conspiracy against Ghost Rider, and you see just how Death Watch is pulling strings from the shadows. And right after that is when Johnny Blaze finally makes his way to New York and makes contact with Danny Ketch. This is right after Ghost Rider is transformed back into Danny Ketch, and he takes Danny hostage. And when he recounts his story to Danny, we see a little more of what happened to Johnny Blaze, after the Ghost Rider series. We see that he had, a happy life. He, married his girlfriend, from back in the original series, and then the two of them had kids together, but that happiness was ruined once the news reports of this new Ghost Rider started coming in. And so Johnny Blaze is thinking that, much like Doctor Strange and Nightmare had thought, that this new Ghost Rider is merely Zarathos in another form. And so, he becomes obsessed with, going after Ghost Rider and destroying him. And so once he tells Danny this, he says, "I don't want to kill you, but, I'll do what I have to take Zarathos out." And so, Danny, he sees a news report of some rather horrific mutilations and attacks on innocent civilians, and it turns out that he recognizes the MO, because Blackout, who we last saw in issue 9 of the Ghost Rider series, has actually been in hiding in the sewers and preying on people and growing stronger and further enforcing his vendetta against Danny Ketch. He's building up his strength so he can have another showdown with Danny Ketch and Ghost Rider. And Death Watch brings him in on his plans for Ghost Rider as well, but he's aware that a Blackout has his personal reasons for going after Ghost Rider, whereas Death Watch is just saying, hey, this guy's an obstacle in our plans, whereas Blackout is wanting to get revenge on Ghost Rider and Danny Ketch for quote unquote ruining his face. And so Death Watch grudgingly allows Blackout in on his plans to take out Ghost Rider. And he also brings in Heart, the female group of mercenaries that we last saw back in issue 9. And so he's got Blackout as well as Heart both going after Ghost Rider. And but then cutting back to Danny Ketch and Johnny Blaze, once Danny sees this on these news stories, he freaks out and he ends up transforming into Ghost Rider. And once that happens, Johnny is able to use some mystical spells that he had picked up over the years, and he's able to temporarily bind Ghost Rider. And basically he's about to try and kill him by way of multiple shotgun rounds, which probably wouldn't do much to Ghost Rider, but something strange happens. Ghost Rider reaches out to the shotgun, to take it away from Johnny Blaze, but then his Hellfire leaps from him to the shotgun and to Johnny. And the last time something like that happened was back in the Fantastic Four storyline, Monsters Unleashed. And that was something that caught him off guard then, and it catches him even more off guard now. And so once that happens, both Johnny and Ghost Rider are like, what just happened? And so, Ghost Rider, he's able to, break through this mystical, barrier that Johnny's erected, and he's basically, trying to, push Johnny aside so he can go after Blackout. And Johnny, he, takes his shotgun and fires at him, but instead of just ordinary ammo this time, it seems to be like an infinite round of Hellfire bullets. And so somehow Ghost Rider's, interaction with Johnny has made it to where, his weapon, is now literally fueled by hell. And so, even though he's confused as to why that is, he, basically says, hey, I'm not looking to gift horse in the mouth. I'm going to kill you. And so, because he's still convinced that this is Zarathos. And so, he hits him repeatedly to the point where Ghost Rider's literally dying. And so, but he's able to, get away from Johnny, and, he, tries to hunt down Blackout, who's still, trying to draw him out. And that he eventually, tracks him down to this park, and, the two of them fight one another, only to be, found by both Johnny Blaze and the members of Heart. And so, right when that happens, the leader of the group of Heart, she learns from Death Watch that, Blackout is actually working, for Death Watch. And so, when that happens, she realizes that, she's being manipulated. She and her group are being manipulated by, someone who is decidedly, more than, say, this, big time entrepreneur, which, that was Death Watch's public persona, but once she realizes that Death Watch has been actively employing Blackout, and Blackout's the one who's been behind all these murders, then, she basically calls the group off of going after Ghost Rider, and she instead, takes it upon herself, because she's the closest in the area, to go after, Blackout. And so right then and there, Johnny, Blackout, and Ghost Rider are all basically converging. And, Ghost Rider's, just, gotten to where he's able to, stop Blackout from killing two more people, and he's beating the crap out of him and nearly kills him. But then Johnny, threatens to, kill Ghost Rider. And so, but unfortunately, though, Blackout is able to, grab one of the civilians that he had almost killed, and is threatening to, slice her throat unless, they allow him to walk away. And so the leader of Heart, she's able to wound him, which gives Ghost Rider the opportunity to move in and, basically get him in this, hold. And he's telling Johnny to, shoot them both, because, if they let, Blackout go, he's just going to kill again. And he's, at this point, too weak to, do what he needs to do to take Blackout out. And so Johnny shoots him, and in the process, the hellfire that comes from Ghost Rider's body further, damages Blackout, to where his face is even more deformed than it was, and he's, writhing and in pain, and Ghost Rider's, about to kill him, with his bare hands, which is when, Johnny, tells him that, hey, I have to know, are you Zarathos or are you something else? because Zarathos was a killer. What are you? And so Ghost Rider reluctantly backs away and says, I may not know who I am, but I'm not a killer. And so, he leaves the scene, and that's when the authorities come in to, basically, take Blackout away. And they're also, questioning the leader of Heart as well as Johnny. And so, Ghost Rider, he makes it back to the Cypress Hill Cemetery and transforms back into Danny Ketch, and who is also weakened from, the experience of Ghost Rider being nearly killed by Johnny. And so once he comes to, he's in the hospital, and it turns out that Johnny's actually was able to follow Ghost Rider's trail to the same cemetery, and he took Danny to the hospital. And he's been more or less in a coma for a few days, and so initially Danny's freaking out, thinking that Johnny's there to kill him, but it turns out that he's kind of made friends with his family, and so once he finds that out, he said, Danny's like, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And so, basically, Johnny kind of takes on this sort of, older brother or almost surrogate father-like role to him, in the sense that, he tries to tell him more about, Ghost Rider, as well as, how, he needs to learn to defend himself, because there are going to be times where, maybe he can't transform into Ghost Rider when he needs to. And also, he tries to give Ghost Rider, of all people, some advice because of what he's been through, under Zarathos, because he still doesn't know if this new Ghost Rider is Zarathos or is someone else or something else. But he realizes that whoever he is, he's trying to, do the right thing. And so it's interesting to see, Johnny, befriending both Ghost Rider and Danny after trying to kill Ghost Rider. And there's still the mystery of, why did the Hellfire, go from Ghost Rider to him? Was there still a connection with Zarathos? And so all this is going on, and then it turns out that there's, that Danny's mother has been visiting this corrupt reverend, a guy named Styge, who, claims to be able to, bring back, the deceased loved ones, for someone by way of eating someone's sins. Like, so, basically, if you're a sinner, or if you say you're a sinner, he can absorb your sins and supposedly bring back, one of your dead loved ones. And so basically, Styge is kind of a corrupt evangelist. And it turns out that he also has a penchant for cannibalism. And so somehow, he had, acquired, this ability to, basically feed on someone, both on a physical and spiritual level. And, this whole bit about bringing back, one's loved ones, is just, a way of saying, yeah, sure, I'll reunite you, and he basically just kills them. And it's kind of like a racket he's got going, but, once, Danny and Johnny find out that Danny's mom has been going to this guy, even before they know exactly what's going on with Styge, they know that something's off with the guy. And so, they try to get her out of there, but not only are they, defeated by Styge's forces, but also Hobgoblin, from, way back in issues 6 and 7 of Spider-Man, the Philip Macendale version, comes onto the scene, because he's still in this, demonic state wherein, he's convinced that, he's a servant of the Lord, and everyone else is like an agent of the devil. And so when he sees that this church has been desecrated by Styge and, his goons, and also he sees that Ghost Rider is on hand there, he breaks into the fight and he kidnaps Danny's mom. And so while he's holding her hostage, Johnny and Danny try to, basically navigate this, criminal underworld, and trying to find out who might know where Hobgoblin is. And they eventually are able to pick up Hobgoblin's trail and go after him, and they're joined by Spider-Man. And so the three of them are ultimately able to defeat Hobgoblin, and Hobgoblin proves that he's no less crazier than he was last time Ghost Rider and Spider-Man fought him. And much like the last time, Spider-Man keeps Ghost Rider from killing Hobgoblin, which ultimately would probably come back to bite him in the butt later on, because Hobgoblin is undoubtedly going to kill other people from then on. But also Spider-Man catches up with Johnny Blaze and figures asks him, hey, where have you been all this time? But yeah, so after they defeat Hobgoblin, Danny takes it upon himself to go after Reverend Styge, because his mom is still convinced that by going along with Styge, he'll be able to bring back her daughter and Danny's sister, Barbara Ketch. And so so Danny he does some detective work and on his own, because at that point Johnny had to go back to his family, and so he's trying to tell Danny, hey, don't do this on your own. But Danny ignores him, so he's like, okay, it's out of my hands. And so he's like, just try and remember what I taught you, and Ghost Rider. And so Danny he goes to where Styge and his people are preying on bereaved individuals, and including Danny's mom. And Styge has already killed one person, and he's about to do the same to Danny's mom, which is when Danny is able to transform into Ghost Rider due to the innocent blood that has been spilled. And as Ghost Rider, he just beats the crap out of Styge, and in the process reveals to Danny's mom Styge's demonic nature, because like he still looks human, but he has like some demonic clawed hands. And Styge just basically admits that this is all just like one big con to indulge in his cannibalism, as well as to bring nourishment not only to himself but to his master, who is the one who gave him these powers. And so but Ghost Rider is able to defeat Styge, and he's not able to use his penance stare on him, because in his words he senses that Styge is enslaved to another in his soul, which I guess means that Ghost Rider's penance stare would be harmless on Styge, but that doesn't mean he can't beat the crap out of him. So he beats him to within an inch of his life, and then from there he's able to make sure that the innocent people are able to get away from Styge's trap. And so once his mom is back at home, Ghost Rider, after having transformed back into Danny, is able to eventually communicate with his mom, and the two of them talk about how much they miss Barbara, but but they both think that Barbara will always live on in their hearts as long as they remember her. And so you have this very human moment of the two of them reconnecting, and that honestly I think would have been a good place to end this collection, but unfortunately we have issues 19 and 20 wherein we're introduced to the character Suicide, who is a guy who is basically wanting to kill himself, because his life has gone wrong. He's apparently he's got a divorce that just happened, and his wife got the kids, and he lost his job and all this stuff. And so, he wants to kill himself, but he doesn't have the courage to do so, which is when Mephisto comes onto the scene and makes a deal with him. He says that, he'll give him, the courage to kill himself in exchange for his soul. And so, the guy's like, okay. and so, so in the process, his body is physically transformed to where, he's stronger and, faster. And also he can, regenerate from, damage, but the only thing that can kill him is Ghost Rider. And so, he, has to find Ghost Rider in order for him, to be able to die. Like, he has to convince Ghost Rider to kill him. And in the meantime, Ghost Rider's dead set on going after Zodiac. And, Zodiac this time, is on the run, because, Ghost Rider came that close to catching him last time. And while he's going after Zodiac, Suicide's going after, Ghost Rider. And, he even gets to a point where, since Ghost Rider refuses to kill him, but is all dead set on going after Zodiac, he decides to work with Ghost Rider because he's convinced that, maybe if he helps Ghost Rider to, catch Zodiac, then Ghost Rider will quote unquote owe him and end his life. But then, in the meantime, though, we, get Zodiac's, quote unquote true origin story, wherein it turns out that he had been running this occult bookstore, but during this invasion, a demonic invasion called Inferno, which mostly took place in the X-Men books, but also took place in some of the other Marvel books. It's this group of demons basically made a bargain with this guy, and he was able to gain this occult power, but at the cost of being their servant. And so he's been working with these demons ever since then, and as this sort of mercenary. And he's been basically setting up these way stations for human sacrifice and what have you. And so Ghost Rider attempts to use his penance stare on him, but once he rips his mask off, that's when he realizes that Zodiac's been mutated by his demonic masters to where he has multiple eyes. So basically the penance stare is rendered useless on the guy, and ultimately Ghost Rider, once he's kind of thrown for a loop as far as that goes, Suicide takes it upon himself to hurl himself and Zodiac into this pile of jagged metal, kind of like it was like a junkyard or something. And he basically tackles Zodiac into this pit where both of them are impaled on this jagged metal that's sticking out everywhere. And so Zodiac is dead, but Suicide, though, he comes that close to dying, but his body regenerates. And so he and Ghost Rider decide to throw Zodiac's body into this incinerator just on the off chance there's any sort of life left in him, because of his demonic abilities that were given to him by his masters. And so once they dispose of Zodiac's body, Suicide insists that Ghost Rider owes him, and that he wants Ghost Rider to kill him, but Ghost Rider refuses, saying that life is a precious gift, and I hope that you learn to use it, because somehow you've been given a new lease on life. And granted, Suicide doesn't tell him about the fact that he made a deal with the devil to get this power, but then Ghost Rider leaves, and Suicide is hailed by the media as, a local hero, for helping to save some civilians from Zodiac while he and Ghost Rider are going after the guy. And so the book ends with Danny, reading, an article from the newspaper at his home about suicide, and saving the day from Zodiac. And so he's like, that's one bad guy down. Now on to Snowblind and Death Watch, and that's how the book ends. So, yeah, all in all, I thought that this was a good collection of stories, and I thought this was a good book. But I really think that they should have ended things in this volume with issue number 18, or at the very least, as I mentioned earlier, maybe they could have thrown in the Hearts of Darkness at the very end, right after 19 and 20, because it's a good collection of stories up until the last two issues, because you have this really good sense of character development and world building from issues 11 through 18, wherein you have Nightmare recounting Zarathos's origin story to Ghost Rider and Danny Ketch, which helps to catch new readers up on what happened in the series prior to this one. And it also is basically a sign to readers of the old series that there is definitely a connection to what came before, and we're finally starting to see it. And so and I liked how they did that. And Doctor Strange's involvement was actually pretty cool too, because much like Nightmare, he's thinking that this new Ghost Rider is Zarathos, but he ultimately finds that at the very least, whoever this new Ghost Rider is, he seems to, be trying to do the right thing. And so, much like, how Johnny Blaze handled this, Ghost Rider situation, once he came into contact with him, it's like, both Doctor Strange and Johnny Blaze, both tried to, defeat Ghost Rider because they both thought he was Zarathos. But then, if they weren't proven entirely wrong, then at the very least, they saw that, this new Ghost Rider, whoever he was trying to, help, the innocent. He was trying to avenge them. And so he was technically on the side of good, regardless of his hellish abilities. And so I thought it was interesting seeing how both Johnny Blaze and Doctor Strange went from trying to, attack Ghost Rider to ultimately trying to help him. And also, it was interesting seeing, two different, takes on Doctor Strange, both with Howard Mackie with the Ghost Rider stories, as well as Roy and Dan Thomas, in the Doctor Strange story. And also, let's see, I did like the character of Snowblind. He had what we saw of him. It seemed like there was an interesting backstory, and the hints that he and Death Watch worked together in the past. It definitely established that there was this sort of underworld mercenary background. And I liked how Snowblind actually had a sense of strategy when it came to fighting Ghost Rider. And even though their encounter ultimately ended in a draw, I did like the fact that there was an inventive reason as to why the penance stare wouldn't work on him. So then and I also, it was interesting seeing how there was this conspiracy to slander Ghost Rider in terms of, say, public perception, and how Death Watch is just in the background pulling the strings, because for a bit he seemed to just kind of vanish from the pages of Ghost Rider, but it turns out he's still there, just working from the shadows this time. And so I liked that. And then also, the best part of the book is definitely when Johnny Blaze is brought back into the fold, and seeing him, as another reviewer put it, suffering from an undiagnosed case of PTSD from his experience with the Zarathos. I mean, that was something that was pretty well done, and you definitely saw that Johnny was a rather haunted individual, and you understood why he was so obsessed with taking this Ghost Rider down, because he understandably, thought that this was Zarathos, the being that put him through hell for so many years. But thankfully, though, he, he changes his mind, and and we get to see how he takes on sort of a mentor role for both Ghost Rider and Danny, and I liked seeing that. It was very good, development for both Johnny Blaze's character as well as Ghost Rider's character and Danny's. And I kind of wish we'd gotten a little more time, because this happens over only a couple of issues. But I will say that I appreciate that Howard Mackie and the creative team showed that a sense of time was passing, like a few days, a few weeks, and it was a transition of panels, that kind of thing. So even though this only happened in the span of 2 or 3 issues, it does show that within the world of Ghost Rider, a long series of days, a long amount of time was passing, wherein Johnny was, mentoring Danny and Ghost Rider. So I did appreciate that. And as far as, say, the character of Hobgoblin being brought back in, I appreciate how his portrayal was consistent with what came before, in the sense of, say, Ghost Rider and Spider-Man having, confronted him back in issue 6 and 7 of Spider-Man, the Masks storyline that was done by Todd McFarlane. And I liked how his portrayal was consistent with that, and how that sense of, character development, since then, has, changed with, say, Ghost Rider being more nuanced, since the last time the two of them fought. And also, there was a real sense of horror, with, how he how he kidnapped Danny's mom, because, I mean, on one hand, she's fallen prey to a religious con artist who has a cannibalistic, who has a penchant for cannibalism, which is horrifying enough. But then you have this, genuinely demonic, individual, Hobgoblin, come in and literally, take her away. I mean, it's something that, you felt a sense of horror for, or horror about, because, this is someone that is family for Danny, and he's already lost his sister. And so, the sense of dread that, the characters felt, because of the situation, because Johnny, he cares, about Danny's mom because he's befriended the family at this point. And so it was very human in terms of how, the horror of the situation was depicted, I thought. And it was cool seeing Spider-Man on the scene, but I do think that they went a little too hard into the whole, thou shalt not kill, as far as, his philosophy on fighting crime and what have you, because every time, Ghost Rider is about to, do the logical thing and take, Hobgoblin out, Spider-Man keeps trying to stop Ghost Rider, and it ultimately takes Johnny Blaze acting as kind of a mediator between the two, for them to finally just work together and ultimately defeat Hobgoblin. So, I mean, it was cool seeing Spider-Man. He's one of my favorite characters, but I think that maybe, if they had dialed down his whole "thou shalt not kill," mentality, I think, his presence would have been, I guess, more natural. In a sense, it was natural because, Hobgoblin is Spider-Man's foe, and, the last time they had fought, he and Ghost Rider had come across one another. So his presence makes sense. I just think that, his whole, don't kill him bit, was a little too on the nose, I guess you could say. But then, you get to issue 18, where, Danny, takes it upon himself to, get to the bottom of what's going on with Reverend Styge. And so, not only do you have, the bit that, the demonic master that Styge serves, the one who's in the shadows at this point, has a connection with the Ghost Rider, or at least, Zarathos. And you get the idea that this is almost certainly Centurious, somehow escaped from the Soul Crystal. They don't come out and say it, but based on his dialogue, you get the idea that this is Centurious. And so you have another callback to what came before, but you also have a very beautiful, if tragically human moment with Danny and his mom, coming together and basically finally uniting in grief over, the loss of Barbara. And so it's like you finally get this sense of closure, which on a very human level is very relatable. And I thought it was probably one of the best moments of the series, and I think it would have been a good way to end this volume. But unfortunately, though, with issues 19 and 20, there's kind of a sour note that the book ends on, wherein you have not only, the introduction of a character who I honestly thought was pretty stupid. It felt like they tried to bring in some kind of Tales from the Crypt type of story, about a guy making a deal with the devil. But then, the fact that they made him so whiny is something that was very annoying, especially since he was a big part of these two issues. But also, they, for some reason, made him look like kind of an S&M type, enthusiast, which you're kind of like, okay, I know Ghost Rider is a darker and edgier book, but bringing in S&M to something like this is just kind of stupid. I mean, it might have worked in a mature readers only type of story, but for a code-approved urban horror book like Ghost Rider, it just felt kind of ridiculous, and so Suicide as a character is someone that I honestly thought didn't work on any level. I could see maybe a Deal with the Devil type of story working as a standalone story, but in like this ongoing Ghost Rider story, it's just like, what the hell is this doing here? And also, I'm not trying to be politically correct, but suicide is something that is a very serious topic, and just making it to where this guy's literally trying to kill himself and going on and on and on about it, it just feels very awkward and uncomfortable, I guess you could say. Like, and I'm like, not in the sense that, I don't know, I guess it depends on your temperament and your mentality regarding the subject of suicide and how it's depicted. But the way it was handled here, where you had a guy who was genuinely suicidal, you could have had, I guess you could say, maybe a black comedy type of story, where you have someone trying to kill themselves repeatedly, but they can't die, that kind of thing. But having it in this type of book, it just felt kind of, stupid and, in bad taste, I thought. I'm not trying to be all like, we need to cancel this. I mean, I'm not trying to do that, okay? I just, if you're going to do something like that, you need to actually have, a good characterization as well as a good story. And so Suicide as a character honestly just didn't work. And then also with Zodiac. Zodiac was a villain that initially was very promising in his appearances. Like, he went from, say, as other reviewers have put it, he went from a mercenary who had a fascinating gimmick in the sense that, not only was he killing people for his employers, and making it look like these murders were, say, the work of a I guess you could say an obsessed maniac or something, but it was just in fact a trick, to throw people off his scent. I mean, yes, there were Zodiac signs, written in blood, but there was nothing like, say, he himself wasn't crazy. It was just like his calling card, as it were. And also, the fact that he was able to, have these duplicates of himself, acting on his behalf, these android duplicates. I mean, that was a fascinating trick as well. But then, you have the fact that, it's revealed by him that he's working for these demons who employ him to establish these way stations of human sacrifice. I mean, that was another interesting bit. But then when he's in these issues, when he's in issues 19 and 20, then they change his gimmick again, and so it's like the creative teams couldn't seem to make up their minds as far as what they wanted Zodiac to be. And I'm not sure like if it's all Howard Mackie's fault or if it was like a collaborative effort as far as that goes. But Zodiac is someone that started off interesting, but by the time he his story was ended, so to speak, it became pretty clear that the creative teams didn't know what they wanted to do with Zodiac. And so, I mean, yes, we have a sense of finality in terms of Zodiac is dead, but at the same time, though, it's kind of like, okay, we literally don't know what we're doing with this guy, so let's just bump him off, And so, to add insult to injury, it's not Ghost Rider who kills him; it's Suicide, a character that is really stupid. So you have one character, Zodiac, who started off good, or at the very least interesting, but then became more and more convoluted and confusing as his appearances went on. And then on the other hand, you have a character who was in no way intriguing whatsoever, being the one to save the day, as it were. And so, yeah, that's I was trying to figure out how I was going to rate this book because on one hand, issues 11 through 18, really solid issues and very good storytelling in terms of writing and artwork. But on the other hand, though, 19 and 20 are definitely low points for the Ghost Rider book. Not only for this book, but just for the series in general. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give this volume 4 stars like I did with volume 1, but with the caveat that you might want to like savor the good stuff that came from issues 11 through 18, but just kind of come up with your own story when it comes to, say, how Zodiac's plot thread is resolved, because you'll probably come up with something much better than issues 19 and 20 ultimately were. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give Ghost Rider Danny Ketch Classic Volume 2 4 out of 5 stars. It was ultimately a good book with 2 duds being the last stories in this book. But if you can either bear that in mind or just come up with your own conclusion to the Zodiac story, I think that you as a reader, or y'all as readers, will more than likely appreciate the fact that the majority of this book is actually pretty good. And also, I was going to mention the artwork continues to be very well done. It's sort of like a very good sense of urban horror is established, but there's also more of a supernatural feel with some of the stories in this issue, because with issue 11 you have Larry Stroman, who had worked on X Factor as well as Dark Stars for DC, doing some remarkable guest artwork for issue 11, and you have the character of Nightmare being brought in, and you have some very surreal Steve Ditko-ish like moments, but I mean, just look at this stuff here. And I mean, really good artwork. And then, of course, with issue 12, that marks the end of Mark Texeria's run as regular artist. There's Zodiac right there. always thought this was a pretty cool looking monster. But let's see. And the artwork on the Doctor Strange story, you know, is more cartoonish than gritty, but I still thought it was pretty good. You know, you still have some pretty good looking monsters. And then, you know, with issue 13, we're back with the grim and gritty art. Here's a really good picture of Snowblind. I like how you have, you know, his eyes, you know, glowing like that. You know, kind of signifying that he's building up the white field that he uses. And so once he has that in effect, you can see, you know, he's actually able to put up a pretty good fight against Ghost Rider. But yeah, I mean, Mark Texeria, I mean, he did some really good artwork, and you know, here's, you know, you got Johnny Blaze recounting his story to Danny Ketch. Really good artwork. And I love this shot, you know, where, you know, Blackout is brought back into the story, where, you know, you find all these dead bodies in the sewer, and you got that. I always like this picture right here. You know, Johnny Blaze, you know, using, you know, the mystical knowledge he'd learned from a while back to, you know, trap Ghost Rider. But I thought this was a cool one. That's she's the leader of Heart, and that's when she's finding out that, you know, Death Watch had actually been employing Blackout, you know. So and I always thought this was a good picture of Hobgoblin. So, you know, you have, you know, artwork that's consistently good. And so I always thought, you know, when it came to, say, like the grim and gritty stuff of Ghost Rider, I mean, these early volumes, you know, were some of the best when it came to the artwork. But yeah, so, you know, that was my take on it. I thought overall it was a good book. I really liked the sense of further character development with Danny Ketch, Ghost Rider, and especially Johnny Blaze. And I liked seeing, you know, the sense of mystery further, you know, developed as far as, you know, who and what this new Ghost Rider really is. And I like the fact that, you know, at this point it seems that, you know, while people are thinking he's Zarathos, he's more than likely not Zarathos. But at the same time, you know, it's nice to see that, you know, this second Ghost Rider series is, you know, calling back to, you know, what came before. Like, you know, there is a connection there. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. That's one of the things that was definitely one of the strong points of the book. Excuse me, at this point in time. As I've mentioned, I just wish that this collection had ended on a better note than, you know, issues 19 and 20. But if you can, you know, separate those two, you know, and just, you know, focus on issues 11 through 18 as far as, you know, the storytelling goes, it's actually a pretty good book. So, real quick, you know, just kind of as a bonus, I was going to show you all the cover art of the original issues. So here's issue number 11. You know, you got Ghost Rider being besieged by Nightmare's, you know, minions, and then you have that seem to be sort of like this weird, you know, smorgasbord of organic monstrosity. And then you have Danny Ketch coming in, you know, trying to help Ghost Rider out on his own bike. Then you have Nightmare off in the shadows. But in this issue, Nightmare just looks amazing. Then you have issue 12 of Ghost Rider, and I always thought this was a good, you know, art style right here. I mean, because, with Doctor Strange, the grittiness is kind of taken away, and so, you have this sort of more, I guess you could say, mainstream look for Ghost Rider at this point. But this is Javier Saltares' last issue as regular artist, and he wouldn't come back to the book, I think, as regular artist until, the book was almost at its end. Like, we're talking, years later, So, but at this point in time, though, as far as when Howard Mackie was still on the book, this is the last issue that Javier Saltares worked on the series. So, it was a bummer to see him go because he was really good when it came to pencils. But when Mark Texeira took over with issue 13, it was still an awesome looking book, because Mark Texeira has always been good at doing really grim and gritty stuff. But beautiful cover painting by him too. So you got Ghost Rider on his bike, really badass looking, picture, painting here, and then you have Snowblind, with the white field being used by him. And then you have issue 14, and I do think that, like, it's not bad cover art, but I just think that, for the emotional magnitude of the story that took place within this issue, this is where Johnny Blaze, is, telling Danny Ketch, his story and what have you, where you really see that he's got an undiagnosed case of PTSD. For an emotionally wrenching, story, it would have been nice if, I guess, the cover had been a little more somber, but I mean, it's still a pretty cool looking cover, Johnny, Ghost Rider fighting one another. And here is issue 15. And the cool thing about this cover is that it literally glows in the dark. I've tried it, it works. And this was probably like one of, the series, hottest, issues because of that. And also the story is pretty good too, and this is where, for the time, the Blackout storyline's resolved. And so then you have issue 16, which for the most part makes up the back artwork of this volume. But you have, I like how you've got Hobgoblin being reflected on Ghost Rider's bike. And you got Spider-Man, Johnny Blaze right there. And it made me think of issue number 3 of Darkhawk, because it was very similar in the sense that you have, Hobgoblin as the main villain, but he's being reflected on something that's staring out at the reader. But in that case, you have, Hobgoblin being reflected on Darkhawk's armor, and then you had Spider-Man in the background getting ready to fight. So I liked how there's a very similar, type of artwork here, except Hobgoblin being reflected on Ghost Rider's bike. Then you have issue number 17. Pretty cool, fight scene here. And then you have one of my favorites, both in terms of, the actual story as well as the cover art, is issue number 18. Beautiful painted cover. I don't know the guy's full name, but his last name's Nelson. But beautiful looking cover here. And, I liked how, I don't know, like maybe it just depends on how you look at, this, face on Ghost Rider, but I don't know, when I look at it, I see that there's almost like a sad look to him. I mean, maybe it's just me, but, considering the nature of the story, it's the resolution of, the Reverend Styge plot thread, and, Danny's mom, ultimately, realizing that, Barbara's lost to her. I mean, Barbara's dead, but she'll always live on in her heart as well as Danny's, as long as they remember her. And, I liked how, there was that bit of closure there in this issue. So maybe, maybe I'm just picking up on, the emotional context and, transferring it to Ghost Rider's face here. But regardless, it's a beautiful cover. And like I said, I really wish they had ended the volume with this issue, because that would have been a good way to do it. But unfortunately, you got issue 19. So you go from that, you go from this to something kind of ugly like this. I mean, it's technically not a bad cover, but at the same time, it's, seeing what came before it, it's kind of a letdown. Although I will admit that Mephisto right here, I liked how he kind of looks like the Lord of Darkness from Legend. The Tim Curry and makeup and all that. So I do like how Mephisto looks here. But then I guess I should point out that for Mephisto being involved in this story, he's only involved for a little bit, and usually when he's on the scene, you think that he'd have more of a presence in the book. I mean, let's put it this way, in the issues of Thor that I recently reviewed, Mephisto had a stronger presence, in Ghost Rider's. He had a stronger connection to Ghost Rider in a story of Thor than he does in Ghost Rider's own book at this point. So, what does that tell you? And then last, and arguably least, you have issue number 20. And that's Suicide right there. I don't know how we all can see it, but, for some reason they have him decked out in like a fishnet shirt thing. And it's like, why? I mean, are you trying to make it... See, I just didn't get what they're trying to do with the character of Suicide. Were they trying to, have like an African American, superhero who was suicidal and goth at the same time? I mean, how many stereotypes are we trying to do here? I don't really know for sure. And Suicide is a character that you don't see much of after this. And there's Zodiac being choked out by Ghost Rider there. And I always thought that, Zodiac, how he was drawn here, kind of looked like a scroll more than anything. But yeah, this is the last time you see Zodiac. Zodiac is actually killed. So as lame as these two issues were, I will give him credit and say that, Zodiac is actually bumped off for real. So, but yeah, that was volume 2 of Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch Classic. And I hope you all enjoyed the review. And if you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe. You got any questions, comments? I would love to hear them. And I look forward to, telling y'all more about Ghost Rider. So stay tuned. So take care. Good day. Bye.